positive charges when they are close by, or even negative charges when they are close by, they repel each other. Basically, like charges repel each other. And I am sending positive charges. I'm sending alpha particles, which are nothing but positive charges, towards the gold foil, right? So I am sending positive charges. The gold foil has gold atoms inside them. The gold atoms have nucleus, right? Nucleus which has protons, and the protons are positively charged. So the positive or the alpha particles I am sending, they are positively charged, and the nucleus, gold nucleus, is also positively charged. So when these two positively charged particles come near each other, basically when the alpha particle comes close to the nucleus, it repels. Okay, so it repels and it falls in a different direction. Okay, which is why we see these scintillations on, we see the scintillations on these other directions also. Okay, and these are so these are very few alpha particles that are deflected. That is because of the repulsion between like charges. So from that he inferred, or he deduced, or he understood that the nucleus should also have some kind of a positively charged particle. Okay. So the other thing he also noticed that an atom is neutral, right? So for example, any atom is neutral. It is not, by itself, it's not positively charged or negatively charged. There are equal number of protons and equal number of electrons in a neutral atom. So he said, okay, if the atom itself is neutral, that means there has to be a negatively charged particle that balances the positively charged particle. And he knew that, and he said that these electrons revolve around the nucleus just like planets revolve around the sun. So he also inferred about the arrangement of electrons. Okay, the presence of electrons was discovered by, so electrons were discovered by J.J. Thomson, but the arrangement of electrons, that the electrons revolve around the nucleus, that was proposed by Rutherford. Okay. The next thing he spoke about was the stability of atom. So according to Rutherford, revolving electron is under the influence of two types of forces. Yeah, so he said the stability of electron is influenced by two types of forces. So basically, whenever an electron, again I'm going to just draw, let's say, hydrogen atom. Okay, hydrogen atom has one proton, it has no neutrons, and one electron. Okay, so I'm just going to draw this. Okay, so now what happens is this electron has some velocity. Okay, so it has some velocity v that keeps on changing, right? Which is why, the direction of this velocity keeps on changing, which is why it moves in a circular way. Yeah, so electron revolves around the nucleus. It has a certain velocity and it also has a certain mass. Because of this mass and its velocity, it experiences an outward pull. Okay, so this electron experiences an outward pull. That pull is called as a centrifugal force. So centrifugal force is directed away from the center. Okay, so basically if you take a string and you attach a stone to one end of the string and you hold the other end of the string and you turn it around, you will notice that the string is pulling your hand. And basically what happens, the stone is trying to move away from your hand. So if I release that string from my hand, the stone will fly away. So basically what is happening is that stone has experienced centrifugal force. So due to its mass and velocity, it is experiencing an outward pull. Okay. Now what is happening is the other force that this electron is experiencing is the force of attraction. Why? Because the nucleus is positively charged, electron is negatively charged. So there will be an electrostatic force of attraction. Okay, between the nucleus and the electrons. So these two forces, they are acting in opposite direction, and that is why they They cancel out each other, and that is why the electron continues to rotate about its orbit. Does that make sense to everybody?
So ma'am, because of the centrifugal force, the electrons keep revolving around the nucleus.
No, because of the centrifugal force and the electrostatic force, both the forces have to be there. If only centrifugal force is there, what happens? The electron will just fly away. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. If only the electrostatic force is there, then what happens?
They will not move.
They will collapse. The atom itself will collapse. Yes. So the atom itself will collapse because the electron will fall into the nucleus and the atom will collapse. So both these forces have to be there in order for the electron to go around its orbit. Same thing even with the planets around the sun. Instead of electrostatic force, you have gravitational force. So like between the earth and the sun, there is centrifugal force which pulls the earth away from the sun, and gravitational force which pulls the earth towards the sun. So these two forces cancel each other out, and that is why the earth revolves around the sun. Okay? All right. So stability, the next thing he said was the stability of nucleus and prediction of neutrons. So to explain the stability of nucleus, Rutherford predicted the presence of neutral particles known as neutrons, which neutralize the repulsion among protons. Now, inside the nucleus, let's say now I have helium atoms, okay? I have one helium atom. So inside the helium atom, I have two protons. Now, what happens if the two neutrons were not there? Then what would happen? Anyone?
And the
What would happen?
nucleus would have not been dense enough.
The nucleus would not have been dense enough. Why? Why would you say that?
So, ma'am, because there needs to be a charge.
But
So
there is
that's
charge,
simple.
right? There are two protons are there. Protons are positively charged. Yeah. My question is, what would happen if I remove those two neutrons from a helium nucleus? I'm left with two protons.
Ma'am,
So
the structure would be unbalanced.
structure would be unbalanced. Can you tell me why? You are right.
Ma'am, because when we remove two neutrons,
Hmm.
there may be a chance that the atom would be destroyed because of no neutrons in it.
Yeah, but why?
As you said that the two protons along with the two neutrons, they have a 4-unit mass.
Okay.
So if there will be two protons only, so there will be 2-unit mass, so there will be a unbalance in the structure.
No, it will just be lighter. Okay, so the answer is basically if I did not have neutrons, then these two protons will repel each other because they are two positively charged particles, right? So these two positive charges would have repelled each other. It is only because of the presence of neutrons that they are all intact and not repelling each other. If I had just those protons without neutrons, then what would happen? The entire nucleus would just not exist because it would just explode. Because you just have two protons and they'll repel each other because they're both positively charged. Does that make sense?
Ma'am, but would not the protons get attracted by the electrons?
Yeah, that's
Because
what. So the protons would be attracted by the electrons, and then that's it. Like then you won't have an atom. Yeah. Okay. So that is why it is like he also predicted that there has to be some other particle which is holding these positive charges in place. Okay. So So that is why that is what explains the stability of a nucleus. So he predicted the stability of the nucleus by the presence of neutral particles known as neutrons, which neutralize the repulsion among the protons. But remember, he did not discover the neutrons. He only predicted neutrons. Okay, so he just thought, okay, there must be some other particle which is holding these protons together without making them repel against each other. But he did not discover the neutrons. Okay. So what are the drawbacks of Rutherford's atomic model? So at that time, the theory was that the electron, you know, at that time they used to think that electron revolves around the nucleus and eventually it spirals into the nucleus by losing energy. Okay, this is what they used to think at that time. Okay, so they used to think that if I have a nucleus, then the electron slowly, as it's revolving around the nucleus, it loses energy. And as it's losing energy, it eventually ends up falling into the nucleus. It was thought at that time. So Rutherford was not able to disprove this. He was not able to disprove why the spiral path cannot take place. Okay. So because he was not able to disprove it, this is considered as a drawback of Rutherford's model. So according to classical law of okay, so this at that time the classical law of physics, a charged particle revolving around an oppositely charged particle should lose energy continuously, and finally the atom should collapse. So this is according to the classical law of physics. So basically, whenever you have two charged particles, oppositely charged particles, where one revolves around the other, what should happen is it should lose energy slowly and finally collapse into the nucleus. However, in practice, that did not happen. Okay, so or that does not happen. So that is one of the drawbacks of Rutherford's atomic model. Okay, any questions so far?
And do we have a proof for it right now? Like, has it been discovered or founded out that spiral law, ma'am?
Yeah, there is. That's why I told you, right? Now we know that that is not the case in this case because of the centrifugal force and remember we just did that?
Okay, ma'am. So that is the proof for this spiral.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. So quantum theory. Okay, so why do we have to study about quantum theory? This is not an atomic model. But why are we studying about this? Let's take a look. So in 1900, a German scientist named Max Planck. So Max Planck was a German scientist and he proposed a theory to explain the energy absorbed or emitted by light. So we know that light emits some amount of energy. Okay, we can even feel it, right? So we know that light emits some amount of energy. And Max Planck proposed a theory to explain the energy absorbed or emitted by the light. Okay, so his theory was the main basis of the next atomic model, which is the Bohr's atomic model. Okay, so before we study about the Bohr's atomic model, let's first understand what is this quantum theory that Max Planck proposed. Okay, so the main points of the quantum theory are the substances radiate or absorb energy discontinuously in the form of small packets or bundles of energy. Okay, so these smallest packet of energy, or the smallest packet of energy is called a quantum. And in case of light, the quantum is known as a photon. So basically, light is nothing but small bundles of energy called photons. So light is basically it's a collection of photons. Okay. So the energy of a quantum is directly proportional to the frequency of radiation. What does that mean? So basically, if I have some radiation, what is light? Light is nothing but it's a wave. It is an electromagnetic wave. Okay. So it is a wave, and this wave has, this is the maximum point of the wave, this is the minimum point of the wave, this is the maximum, this is the minimum, maximum, minimum. So basically it goes in a wave, okay? And this distance between the two maximums is called as the wavelength, okay? Now, what is the meaning of frequency? Frequency means how many number of waves can pass, or let's say if I have a ring over here, okay? So how many number of waves will pass through this ring in 1 second? Okay, that will tell me the frequency. Does that make sense? Correct. The number of vibrations per second, or the number of, the number of waves that are passing through a particular point in 1 second. Okay. Max Planck's quantum theory. That's all we are studying. The next slide is the Bohr's atomic model. Okay. So right now we're just studying the Planck's quantum theory. So he said the smallest packet of energy in case of light is called as the photon, and the energy of a quantum is directly proportional to the frequency of radiation. So that means how fast this radiation moves is, I mean, energy is directly proportional to how fast this radiation moves. So that equation is given by E is equal to h mu, where mu is the frequency of the radiation and h is the Planck's constant. Okay, and the value of Planck's constant is given by 6.626 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 34 joules second. So this is an important value, and this is something that you will use time and again repeatedly, even in your future classes. So make sure you just remember this, because it is an important value to know. Okay, so Planck's constant is 6.626 times 10 to the power minus 34 joules second. Okay. Also remember the units. Do not forget that. Joule second. Okay. How did we get joule second? Let me tell you. So basically, energy, the units of energy is given by joule. Okay. The units of frequency or mu, same thing, is given by per second. Okay. So if I just put this over here, it will be joules, energy joules, and h I want to find out, and mu, this symbol over here is called mu. It represents frequency, and for mu it is per second. Okay. So now what happens, for if I want to find out the units of h, what do I need to do? I need to take the mu on this side. So it will be E by mu, which is equal to joule, or which is given by joule times this 1 by second. Second will come up and will become joule second. Okay. And that is equal to h. So that is how I end up getting joule second. Is this clear to everybody? Okay, so if you did not understand or if you do not understand at any point, please feel free to stop me. I can repeat it 100 times if you need me to, not an issue. I just want you to get the concept really well, okay? All right, so this is basically what Planck's quantum theory states. What this means is, whenever there is some energy, so we know that light is a form of energy, and we also know that it is in the form of packets of energy. Okay, so that means these packets I can actually count. 1 packet, 2 packets, 3 packets, 4 packets, so on, right? So these are whole numbers. It's not fraction. Packet is a whole number. So I can count these number of packets. So what that means is, if I have a certain amount of energy, I can calculate what is that value of n. N meaning what is that whole number. Is it 1, 2, 3? How many packets of energy are there? Okay. So also for electromagnetic radiation, one thing that you guys need to remember is E is equal to hc by lambda. All right. So this is nothing but your wavelength. This is lambda. Lambda is wavelength. Wavelength meaning the length of the wave, basically. So if I have, this is my wave, this will be my wavelength. Or I can also say the length between two maximum points is also called as a wavelength. Same thing. Okay. So this and this basically is the same thing. Okay. So this is the length of a wave, basically. So E can also be written as hc by lambda. So what that means is, now if I take these two equations, mu will be equal to c by lambda. So mu is equal to c by lambda. What is c? Can somebody tell me what c is? C is the speed of light, okay, which in air is 3 multiplied by 10 to the power 8 meters per second. C is 3. This is also a constant. Okay, now this wave has a length, right? If I want to calculate the length of this wave, how will I do that? Means the starting point must be the same. That is what that means, right? If I have to calculate the length of this wave, I need to calculate between two similar points. Okay, so that means there are two ways to do this. If I take the start point and I move it here, then the wave is continuing. If I take the start point and I move it here, then a new wave is forming. Can you see that new wave? Okay, so basically if I have two same points, that the difference or the length between those two same points is called lambda. So if it is hard for you to imagine it like this, what I'll do is I'll take the peak of each of these waves. Okay, so I'll take the peak of this wave, I'll take the peak of this wave, I'll take the peak of this wave, take the peak of this wave. Then the distance between these peaks, okay, so that will be lambda. Okay, so basically it's the distance between two similar points. Make sense now?